Hello and welcome. It's Alexa Linton here, your host for the Whole Horse Podcast. We're here to look at all the ways that the horse industry is changing before our very eyes in very cool, very amazing ways. And we're chatting with the people at the forefront of that change, the professionals, the trainers, the body workers, the researchers that are helping our lives with horses become better and better. Thanks for being here. I love that you're here and listening and learning. And if you ever have a guest that you want to suggest or a topic that you want to hear, just let me know and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. It means a lot. And I look forward to seeing you for season 4. Hi, everyone. It's Alexa Linton here, and you're on the Whole Horse Podcast. We're here today with Shannon of Humming Horse, and we're completing the season 4 of the podcast today. We're going to take a little break after this, and I'm so happy, Shannon, that you're here for this final podcast of season 4. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I didn't know it was the final one. I'm honored to see the season out.
Yeah, amazing way to end the season. And
by the way, this is season 4, isn't it?
Yeah.
So can I I don't know if you're into numerology or if your listeners are into numerology.
Oh, I'm sure.
I was just reading on someone else's Instagram stories, this really cool account, whose name is not coming to me right now, but she does like Taoist astrology. And what was she saying about today's astrology? So I'm going to be 44 this year. My numerology is year 4, and apparently 44 in the I Ching hexagram system, I might be saying that wrong, is the horse.
Whoa.
And this is season 4. And today is some kind of special 4 astrology, and it has to do with horses. So maybe this is all divine destiny here.
That's amazing. Well, speaking of big days, today we put the final paperwork together for our new house. Signed the papers. I gave over a check for more money than like I've ever imagined having.
Wow.
And it's happening, guys. I'm moving. I'm moving. So we'll talk more about that maybe towards the end, but it's like a big moment, I think, for many of us right now. So that's really cool. And I think of 4 as well as foundation, right? It's like this sense of the 4 pillars and the strength of that foundation.
A square halt.
Totally. Right. Yeah, completely. All those things.
Like the sacred geometry of horses. 4. I love it. We didn't expect to. Here we are already.
I got the tingles. I got the goosebumps.
Oh man. Let's keep trying to tie in 4.
Yeah, completely. Completely. Yeah. So I'm so excited to be talking to you, Shannon, and I've followed you on Instagram for a while now.
Oh, cool.
I have a total crush on one of your horses because he's just magnificent.
Ivan.
Just amazing. Like got a butt for days, like incredible guy.
Way too big for me. But sometimes you don't choose on bodies. So.
You're saying this to the girl who has both horses over 16 hands.
Right.
I'm pretty little,
Are you little?
I'm pretty little.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're little this way. I didn't know if you're little this way.
I'm like 5'5". I actually went to the doctor's the other day. I'm like, just 5'5". This is average, I suppose.
I would have guessed you were 5'11". So there,
I know.
Your presence is...
Yep, there you go.
Maybe all draft lovers
secretly
have giant presences, even if they're in small bodies.
Completely. Yeah, absolutely. And I just adore those big, like there's something about them, and maybe we can get more into that, but there's just something that draws me to them. And today I would love, because there's people out there who don't know your work, who don't know you. Yeah. What's your work all about? And, kind of what was in a nutshell, how did you come to this point now?
Right. I wish and I will try to, not wander too far from what is supposed to be a nutshell question, but my life has never fit easily. I'm sure no one's fits easily in a really simple nutshell. So I'll try and talk a bit about my approach and how I came to it at the same time. It is a bit of a journey, but Yeah, where to begin? I'll start with the approach.
Yeah, perfect.
So on the most basic level, people would just think I'm a trainer you hire to come in and help you with your horse. So firstly, I don't do lessons from home, although I'm beginning to play with that, but home is quite a sanctuary. So I mostly do lessons off property with existing horse human relationships. So people who are already in a relationship with a horse, that usually is someone who it's their own horse. Maybe they lease it, but that's not usually who gets in touch with me. And chances are, if they're coming to me, it's because they've reached some kind of limit with either a behavioral issue, or they're unhappy with mainstream horsemanship. So on the most basic level, I'm the person you call in to help you ride your horse, work with your horse. But that's on a really basic level, because I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea, because most of my techniques are quite alternative. So my background is from, a young age, riding school and a sport horse background. So all the major English sports, hunter jumper, dressage, eventing, a little heavier on the dressage and eventing side of things than I was on hunter jumper, but kind of experienced them all. And so that still informs my work. That's still, for better, for worse, I'm still in love with those postures. I'm still in love with the movement of a sport horse. I'm still in love with the feeling of a horse in full expression of its power, but also with a certain parameters set by the rider. So I'm in love with that, but I'm sure, along with many of your listeners, there came a point where it became untenable, that the conflict between loving these postures and these movements and this power and finding ways to sit with that power didn't quite gel with how we were treating them. And, I've listened to your podcast, and I think I'm in good company when I say a lot of us, we have pasts that we're maybe not so proud of in terms of how we treated horses in the past. It's how we were taught, right? And so my current approach is really trying to still use the sport horse model as a model, but I will no longer compromise the horse's well-being. And so my approach is communication-based rather than control-based. And I can define that later if we decide we want to, but on a basic level, that's a distinction point. My medium of communication is energy. It's not signals. So if you go on Instagram and you see, there's a lot of really, we met on Instagram, so that's why I'm referring to Instagram, but social media in general, you can see horses performing sport horsey type movements. Maybe it's piaffe, maybe it's passage, really impressive things. Maybe it's without a bridle, maybe it's bareback. Really impressive stuff, but many of them can be just performing off of a signal. And you'll see this when they'll put their child on the horse, and you'll see the horse performing those same things. So for me, I'm not saying that's not impressive. That's incredibly impressive. I don't have horses that do that. But for me, that's not an energetic mode of communication, because an energetic mode of communication means what is coming out of their body as an expression of movement is in direct relation to my body, and what comes out of their body comes back into my body, and we are in a closed loop of energetic, dynamic, reciprocal information. So I'm communication based as opposed to control based. My mode of communication is energy, and in an attempt to keep that energy as, I won't say pure, because by no means is my energetic connection with horses totally pure. That's a master's goal, right? But that is my goal. And purity for me would be measured by lack of resistance between my body and their body. And again, it's a reciprocal loop. So it's not enough to just read brace in their body and resistance in their body and find ways to release that resistance and release that brace. I have to equally be aware of it in my own body and be constantly seeing where. So one of my visual metaphors I give to students is be aware of the relationship between a basketball player's hand and a basketball. Or even a soccer player, you know, the beautiful game, these light touches. Anyone that comes to these sports for the first time, effort's way too much. And the ball doesn't go where they want it to go. And even as they get decent at controlling the ball, often they are controlling the ball and they're having to effort. But, you know, and I do love soccer for this in particular, even though my metaphor usually originates with basketball, the dribbling, is because they call it the beautiful game. And
it's so gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous game.
Soft touches with not even hands. Like as riders, we have to control our hands, like selling yourself, saying like, oh, I've got soft hands, Vaquero hands of silk. But my gosh, soft feet.
Yeah.
Imagine having soft feet. And so to me, those are energy masters. And so reciprocal, energetic, dynamic. And again, I could go on, but this hopefully starts to paint a picture of how my approach works. I mean, this is always the dream. We all know it's the dream to have perfect, energetic, reciprocal. So I guess I will also say, just to finally add to what my approach is about. So it's all those things. Two last things to say about that is, along with keeping the energy pure, and I'm putting the word pure in quotation marks, knowing that that's a lofty goal for there to be zero resistance and perfect reciprocal recycling of energy. But one of my methods for trying to keep it pure is, well, it's kind of combined consensual work. It's not pure consent work. You and I were just talking about Elsa Sinclair. My gosh, I mean, there's a model to go to for what really consensual work looks like. I do aspire to that, but at this moment I'm a pragmatist. And so my consent-based work is somewhat situational. We all know you got to get a horse on a trailer, or I'm always calculating with given clients, how much appetite do they have for full consent work? And if I become too much of a purist, will they all just say, forget it? So I'm factoring that. And along with consensual work is, spatial relations between body awareness between two bodies. So again, these are all like paths we could go down deeper if you decide you want to talk more about any of these things, but just an overview. Final thing I'll say about that is, back to this idea of pure energy, this reciprocal back and forth, and how ideas of pureness don't really help us, because how many of us are like really operating at that pure of a state? So that's my model, is energetic flow, as opposed to a horse's neck being in a perfect position, which to me is not, we can talk about that, but that's an idea, that's a form, that's not energetic flow. So my final thing that is kind of, I think, particular to my approach is process, not perfection. Right? So I think too many people have an idea of perfection. They're holding models of Olympians, which, by the way, I don't think that's where your model of perfection should be coming from.
Whole other topic.
Unpopular opinion. But finally, like we need to drop these models of perfection, and we need to be sinking down into process and what is possible in this moment, given any given partnership's specific circumstances. I don't know if that helps you picture my approach.
That's so,
it's a lot of things.
There's a lot there and I think, I love the concept, because I don't think it's sort of shared as much, but that sense of the movement of the energy. And I get drawn back into this idea of the process over perfection. I know for myself, I've done a lot of different types of training with Diva over the years, some better or for worse, shall we say. And Diva is one of those horses that will give you the beautiful collected neck position, and and then drag her hind end up that sort of thing, right? Because that's a cue when she's learned how to do that, and and that's what we've kind of worked with, and that's kind of been the position of the particular training that we've done. And I know I was talking to you about before we started the podcast around this idea, like, and maybe it's something we can speak to, is she's 22 this year. She's always had she has a long back. She's got a really long back.
Mm-hmm.
There's this part of me that's in a space of, okay, like, how do I keep her, I think that's the part that's agenda based of like, I need to keep her strong, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I like, so she's okay being ridden, and like that she still, her back feels strong enough to do those things.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you, like, what are some of the ways that you work with that for horses that are maybe rehabbing, or any horse really? I mean, I think a lot of horses are working with this, of how to develop strength in a way where it's not a forced thing, or you're not having to create these particular positions that you feel are the thing to do, or the way that you're going to get strength, right?
Right. Yes. So there's so much I could say about and I love it that you're giving me the specific example of the horse, because that falls right in like your specific horse, Diva. Mm-hmm. She has a name, she has a long back, she's part draft. Like it's always comes down to the specifics of the being. So again, I could go so many places with that. So what I'm hearing, and I'm just going to talk like a trainer. We can totally. Listeners can be a fly on the wall for a moment of a hypothetical training scenario. So what I'm remembering you saying is she naturally goes into those overly round positions, but her hind end is trailing behind. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to riff a bit on that, both the specifics of Diva, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to this. So I'll riff also on the general concepts. So firstly, and we have Gert Hushman to thank for, if people, do you know who I mean?
I don't.
Oh gosh, this is like mandatory.
Okay.
I mean, anyone who's riding their horse and caring a little about biomechanics, but especially if they're into dressage, but it's not just about dressage. This is just like correct, and we can even examine this word correct, but correct basic movement for a riding horse. People think dressage is some different thing, but really these are positions for any riding horse. So Gert Hushman, I mean, we have so much to thank this man for. Maybe this is a future guest. He's been on podcasts. I haven't seen stuff from him lately, but I'm sure he's out there doing stuff. He wrote 2, maybe 3 really important books, one called Tug of War, and the other called, I think it's on my wall, so I should be able to see. Tug of War and I'm not, Collection or Contortion.
Oh, I've seen, okay. Yeah,
so
that's
this
the
is
one.
This is really important because, it's not just dressage that has this idea of the round necks. And I will admit, from a very young age, there's 3 shapes I always doodled in a notebook.
Oh, yeah.
One was hearts. Well, no, 4. One was hearts, one was stars, one was coniferous trees. Uh-huh. And the other was that arched neck. You too?
The same 4.
What?
Seriously.
Are you kidding?
I'm not. I can literally show you
there's
my
the
journal.
Number 4 came back.
Yep.
No way. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, right. Like,
and I would draw Christmas trees like all the time. Yes. I don't know why. Like, just.
Yes. I mastered it. Like I should have them tattooed on my body. So I say this as someone who's obsessed with the round neck. Absolute obsession.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolute obsession. And I went through a big period of, I worked at an elite training barn, and we thought we were so great because we could get those necks. And no one locally could get the necks the way we could get the necks. Like, what a bizarre thing. But, I was told that was the sign of having done it correctly. Yep. But that's because somewhere at some point in the history of riding horses, and I will get back to the specifics of Diva, but it's important to frame this, to contextualize this. Because if you go back to the classical tradition, and you'll see the necks are a little different than what they've become now.
Yep.
Right? They're a little bit different, and it's minor to the untrained eye, but it's a big deal to the trained eye. And that neck used to come, like, I liken it to the period at the end of a sentence, right? So if you're riding the horse from back to front, energy originates in the hind end. It moves up through the hindquarters over a back that ideally has no restriction or minimal restriction in it. And it crests over the top, the crest of the horse's neck, like a wave. And unrestricted, you'll see bigger limb movement, right? But so that's back in time. That neck was a byproduct. It came at the end, right? It's what shape would come out once that energy was freely flowing from the behind through an unrestricted back. So it's not that the neck, it's not that we don't want that neck. We do want that neck, but that neck should not be the start point.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in time, and we're at like a hyper version of that in our modern dressage right now, it's become not only the start point, it's the alpha and the omega. It is the start point, the middle point, the end point. So not only should that, like, so first things first, let's remember that the neck should always be an expression of what happens behind. And we're told that. And I was always told you ride a horse from back to front.
Yeah.
But that's not what they actually taught.
No.
They'd say that, but they wouldn't actually do it. And when I meet my students, they all say the same thing, that they've heard this phrase, ride the horse from back to front, but no one's taught them to do that, because I shouldn't say every single instructor, we're in the golden age of like amazing techniques right now. So I shouldn't say that every instructor, but still the majority of instructors are teaching students for the first time. You want to go right, you pull right. You want to go left, you pull left. You want to stop, you pull back on both. That right there, let it be known, is the beginning of the end. That is not how you steer a horse. It is not. And so stepping away from that concept. So back to diva. So when you see the neck curled up, but the hind limbs flying behind. Now, to be kinder to you, that doesn't mean you did that. So I'll also say the specifics of a draft horse, and you can look at pictures of Ivan. If you see Ivan work at Liberty, and I'd love to hear more from other people. I'd love to have a little draft horse support group right now and get stories from other people about whether they experience the same thing with their draft horses. But I've had a lot of drafty types. I've had Canadians in the past.
I've got one of those out here.
So I'm inclined to think that this is, common with them. So if you look at pictures of Ivan doing Liberty, so he's truly at Liberty, and this is his energy, what it looks like when it's flowing naturally. He carries himself in a way that almost looks overbent.
Totally.
And so I could always use that as an excuse and say, well, hey, look, I didn't make him overbent. He's naturally like this. But little additional info on that. My suspicion, and I'm sure more educated people than me could help explain this, those big necks are dams for energy. Energy gets piled up in those big necks. This is my anecdotal analysis. Those big necks pile up energy, and if you don't find a way to get more freedom, you have to teach them freedom in the neck. So it's not as simple as just saying give them freedom of the neck. You have to actively look for ways in which the neck is getting blocked up, and the pull. And make sure that you're not doing anything to exacerbate that, but even better than that, that you're finding ways to free it. And I'll tell you that where I'm at with Ivan right now, he's 6 and I train him very slowly. We're in a bombastic place. Some horses can only get rid of that through a giant buck and a bolt, and then they'll blow out the other side and then they'll find freedom. And really good riders, really athletic, sport horsey type riders that know how to ride that can get rid of that in 5 minutes. They can just go wee, and they just fire the horse out of a cannon. That energy gets unblocked through the neck. Maybe not the first time they try. But this is a way to do it. I wouldn't advise it, because you can, of course, get some emotional baggage with that too. So I've been working on this aspect with Ivan for over a year. And you can look through my images, and it's a study in that curly neck. However, with him, we don't have the trailing hind end. So, I mean, I could go on into the technical aspect of that, but I'll throw it back at you. And I don't know if any of that's
it's so interesting that way, because Diva definitely has like that curled neck just naturally. Raven, not so much. She's like kind of, for a Canadian, got like, my farrier the other day was like, her neck is very like thin, and I was like, I'm not gonna take that as like, but it was more like, she's just like, she's not built like what I generally see with Canadians, where they got those big stocky necks. But what I found with Elsa's course that I found super fascinating, and maybe it will, land for some of you out there, is that one of the things that Elsa teaches is around this idea of you start to really work with what, how does she say it? The most feel good feeling. So you're going and working with different areas, and you're sort of cultivating the most feel good feeling, and then you're moving to the next space before they kind of flick you off and go like, that's too much.
Yeah.
And what it leads to is this sense of, so initially, for example, with Raven, she could have my hands like on her face and nose for like a moment, like a fleeting minute, and she would, and like many horses, kind of like a fly was on their nose, like, okay, get off my face now, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to start to be able to work those, like the movement and the yields through some rocking movement, which is another thing that Elsa teaches. But it was very interesting to me initially. I actually had to do like, so that I do equine cranial, and I actually had to do a ton of cranial work with her. First, releasing the pole, releasing like all through all her cranial bones. It was quite a process, actually. So that she was happy for me to even have my hand on her face, to be able to start working the rocking and working the opening, because, and it was so small initially. Like it was just this, like literally I could rock on her nose only sideways to begin. And it was maybe like a half-inch movement each side when we started. And she couldn't go back. Like she couldn't do an anterior posterior rock really at all. It was so uncomfortable for her. And I thought, wow, like how many horses are like this?
Yeah.
And she would flick me off her nose like really quick. And remember, everybody, with Elsa's work, you're totally free. So if they want to move off, if they want to do, like, they can do those things. But what I found so fascinating with the commitment to that work and daily practice, she now has a beautiful rocking and yielding from the nose and side to side. So it's actually like opened up an incredible amount through there. But it took a lot of time and just gentleness, and like only being there when she wanted me there. And now she actually enjoys the work, the opening, the shifts, and she's really open. So I thought, okay, so how many of us go into riding, put a noseband on with a horse that's immediately goes into resistance to the pressure on the noseband? Right.
So I'm trying to work on an online course, trying to put together my first online course. And the name of it is Mapping the Topography of No. So working with a horse's nose. No, I don't want that. So the opposite of consent. Because many people, they're getting no's, they're not getting yeses. So let's start with the nose, and as well as the nose, the NOSE. And so to what I try to do with the mapping of the topography of no's is we have to first identify, when did the first no come on? And before we can identify when did the first no come on, we have to have some kind of baseline state where we ever had a yes. And so I have a post about where did I leave my harmony? So that's really like, where was my first yes? And when you interrogate it that way, it's like, hang on, most people don't even know, like, wait, did I ever get a yes? And I should have added, when I talked about my approach, that I mostly work bitless, bareback. I'm not opposed to bits. I'm not opposed to tack, but that's like where I'm doing most of my work. My students a little less so, but so that already really helps, because some of the no's happen at the tacking up point. In fact, they come when you put the halter on. So thank you for bringing in, like, man, Elsa's work, like, even if people aren't ready to take the leap to Elsa's work, just knowing that there's this whole other, I don't want to call it an extreme. It is an extreme, but it's an extreme we should all be trying to move ourselves a little closer to. So thank you for reminding me of, so let's take my horse Ivan for a moment, and I'm comparing him to your Diva with some of that blockage in the neck. And he started having a bolting problem. I've written about this on Instagram about a year ago, that I pinpoint back to that neck. That's my suspicion. It's not an absolute. And I've traced back, like, when do I forget the first yes? And I thought my yeses existed in grooming and in tacking up. But now that you're reminding me of this, even, and you've got the better anatomical terms, but tell me again, like, what I'm making the motion of, like, getting that flexion at the pole.
Yep.
But even you were talking about, like, gentle yielding.
And the back and forth. So, like, for anybody that can't see our movement, like the nose coming towards the chest and then out again, that rocking. Yes. Where they get a flexion, like a true flexion in the pole and an extension. Yeah.
Yeah. So I already do this to a degree. Yeah. But of course, with our own animals, we sometimes have more blind spots. It's easier for me to come into an outside partnership and be like, oh, well, this is obvious. This is where such and such is missing. So that idea that, like, let's say you have a whole horse that they've got, they have tension in the pole, or even tension in the neck, or you've just observed their pictures like you do, and you say, oh, I can see that neck is really round, but the hind end is trailing behind. And so you might say, okay, well, under saddle, can I get a little bit of flexion to the right? Can I get a little bit to the left? And if you aren't, the logical thing would be to get off like you're doing, and then check, like, where is my original yes? Can I even get that? I think a lot of us are riding problems if we would extend our line of questioning to, it's not just groundwork. Like, it's the moment your body comes into an engagement with their body, even before the halter is put on. Totally. And it's spatial relations. Sometimes that freeze is coming because you're just too much in their energetic bubble. So maybe if it's not even about the nose flexing left or flexing right. I mean, I'm not saying you specifically, but for a person, maybe it's not even about the nose flexing left and flexing right, and there's a pole problem. Maybe it's just you're so far into their energetic bubble and are grating on them energetically that they're in this perpetual state of brace, and that brace is manifesting. Totally. So those spatial relations, the always paring it down, like, it's not just a riding problem. Like, most riding problems are not riding problems, or at least that's not where they originate. So totally, thank you for that, like, image of you and Diva and Elsa's work helping, and combined with your osteopathic work, that even these tiny yields, and it reminds me of even like Masterson. Yep, totally. And when you feel the brace, even tiny, soften, right? Like, take it off. So I'm not sure what else to go with that.
I love that. And the idea of, like, finding the yes, because, Elsa talks a lot about her stallion Atlas now, because he's kind of her biggest teacher at the moment. And one of the exercises that we did was sort of mapping the horse's body as far as, like, how comfortable they were with not just touch or rocking, but even, like, even you being near them, and, like, how much curiosity do they have in that, and how much freeze. It was fascinating to hear about Atlas, because, like, her entire paper for the first year, chunk of time, I don't remember if it was a year or so, and she could talk more to this, but it was like, red is, I can be 5, 6, 10 feet away, and he's okay with me being there. Yes. And he was entirely red. Yeah. Except for, like, a tiny spot on his face where he would sometimes let her touch. But of course, he'd been in the bucking pens his whole life as a stallion. He lots and lots and lots of trauma, like, from humans. Of course, that, all comes into the way that we see horses, and where their yes is going to be, like, in terms of, are we going to connect? Like, is this cool with you? Like, and I really see that, like, that really kind of woke it up for me. And just understanding, even with Diva, like, because we've been together for so long, you get complacent. You really do. You're like, oh, she's fine with, this, like, and you just kind of, like, barge ahead. Yes. We've always done it this way, rather than, I love that concept that you brought in, is like, where am I and this horse in our process today? Yes. Right.
And do you know what harmony even feels like?
Yeah.
What is your baseline of harmony with this horse? Like realistically, if most people were really honest with themselves about that. So I spend a ton of time in walk.
Yeah.
Like the majority of my work is in walk. It's not for
Totally.
everyone. I love walk. Like walk, and in the classical system they call it the master gait. But I mean, already by the time you're sitting on the horse, you've already skipped a lot of steps. So for the moderate amongst your audience who are thinking about exploring these kind of ways of thinking about the relationship and of energetic reciprocal fluidity and figuring out where the blocks exist and how to unblock. So I think within that mindset, like we got to shave off smaller expectations with our horse. So if you're already like, if you're having issues at jump and canter, might I invite you to start looking for, do you have any harmony in walk? But if you already are, and if you're honest with yourself, because I think most of you will even find issues at walk and bend, right? Like, and bend is really just an expression of alignment. So straightness issues.
Yep.
So if you're really honest with yourself, you're probably going to find that even at walk, there's issues. So I would invite that person to go get off and then let's do groundwork. And I think you'll even find that before the groundwork, like even groundwork is like already potentially going too far, unless it's liberty. So I'd be looking for where's my original yes before the halter even goes on the horse. But then furthermore, I love, and you're reminding me of a lot of concepts that are really kind of blended into part of what I do. Not that I'm laying claim to them, I just happen to use them. But what you're talking about with Elsa, you know, my course is going to be called Mapping the Topography of No, but I love the idea of mapping and specifically mapping a body. So even understanding that if you're going looking for a yes doesn't just exist in a chunk of meat organism. Like it's not like Diva just said yes. She's a molecular being. Parts of her body might be saying yes, parts might be saying no. So the specificity of what you're talking about here with Elsa's work of going to specific body parts, and not even body parts, that's still too big. Little zones within zones within zones, and getting yeses. Like, I mean, I wish I had written the subtitle of, is it Dominique Barbier, The Alchemy of Lightness and its Molecular Equitation? Like just those words. Like molecular, I think it's molecular equitation. The word molecular is in there. But that idea of going so minute with your awareness. And what are we doing in that minuteness? We're not going looking for a bunch of complicated stories. It's like, am I getting a yes or am I getting a no? Is energy flowing or is energy blocked? Like this is the line of questioning. And I'll just add for those that might be interested in this concept of mapping and specificity. Are you familiar with Kathy Sierra's work?
Oh gosh, someone was just telling me about her the other day and was like, you need to check her out.
Oh,
yeah.
between Elsa Sinclair and Kathy Sierra, and I'm sure there's a bunch I'm not aware of, but to me, those are golden beacons at very different
Isn't it funny that they both live on the San Juan Islands?
Oh, do they?
Yeah, I think so.
Which is not that far from us.
No, as the crow flies.
So there could be like some geomancy stuff going on there. But yeah, that's right. They are in that same area. And I don't even know, I'm not even aware. I chat with Kathy on Instagram a fair bit, not like we've talked about everyone, but I don't even know if she knows about Elsa's work. But just quickly, I mean, Kathy's work, Panther Flows is her Instagram handle. And she's a kinesiology background. She's coming at this from a whole other world, right? So she is super heart-centered and super kind and super ethical and all those things, but that's not the angle she's coming at that from. She's kinesiology and she's super into movement science. So she's science. But I personally, I think she's also magic, even if she doesn't admit it. And so one of her things, not like I want to try and speak her system here because I'm sure I'm going to say it wrong, but I have taken her pain course. I highly recommend it. But just on this idea of mapping and of the level of molecularity that we're talking about, it's not just the horse saying yes, it's specific zones within zones within zones. she talks about when it comes to pain, and again, forgive me, Kathy, she's very, I think she'll be okay with this. Forgive me, Kathy, if I mess up the concept a bit, but just to introduce your listeners. So in the brain, because this comes from neuroscience as well, there's this idea that the horse, any organism, any, I guess, mammal in this case, would have an interior map of its own body. And it's like you've got a mental map in your own mind and the animal's mind of what it can and can't do. And when pain comes on the scene or injuries, the resolution on that map gets really dull. So if you picture high resolution map or image, you can blow it up, and you can still see all the detail. But low resolution, very low quality, low detail. So when there's pain, let's say in a hock, and let's say it's long-term pain, that map of what the organism, not just horses, us too. Who am I telling this to? And you know more about anatomy than I do, but it's a fun concept to play with because it's really given me sympathy for working with the horses. That map becomes very dull, right? They can't, it's no longer like they know, oh, my hock, this specific little thing in my hock. It becomes their whole hind end. Because the map, and with less use and increased guardedness, it could eventually be the whole body that just says, forget it, I can't do this. So one of Kathy's approaches is, and it sounds similar to Elsa, is increasing the resolution on that interior neural map. And it can be like really simple things through touch. And through maybe not even, and also reading breaks. Right? Don't keep touching in the spot that keeps making them guarded. Find out where is the zone where I can touch and they aren't guarded, and the zone that I touch and they are. Now we're getting more specific about mapping this body. So sorry, that's just me riffing on what you're taking from Elsa's work, and it's such good stuff about keeping those channels of energy clear and flowing, and not needing to have a science degree or an anatomy expert. It's just reading bodies, thinking consensually, thinking in terms of blocks and releases, energy flowing.
Love it. Love it. I mean, I've seen this in real time with Raven. It's like I said, she has this part of her that sort of just has just gone, nope. Like, and so initially when I started doing Elsa's work, what I noticed was the rocking was really hard for her, like most areas of her body. Like there were small movements. It was very braced. And then, one of the activities is to use the rocking at the chest to start to work the yields, backing up and shoulder and hindquarters, these sorts of things. And initially it's like you'd knock and there was no one home. Like it was just check. And I see that so often with these kind of horses. I saw that with Diva when I first got her, and I don't want to lump draft horses into like a space, but I think sometimes they are so sensitive that they kind of get yelled at all the time, and they just sort of put the earplugs in and go, you know what, like I just can't. Right. And I get that. It was very interesting though to see as we like very gently unraveled that, now the softness that's come into it is like, I can't even believe, like, and I wish it kind of like chronicled it a little better, because now I'm like, oh, this is just what she does. But like when we started, there was just no way I could push on her chest for days and she still would not back up. Like, and now just like finger tip lightness, just skin. And it's like so light, and it's just shifted something in her. That like, I know it's such a small thing, but like, it's not like it feels big,
Well, and even this idea about you wishing you had chronicled it, what I always say to my students is like, and that's amazing that she's it now seems like the problem is fixed. But what I always say to my students is like, a big part of my work is reading patterns, and patterns recur, and don't ever get upset that patterns recur.
Totally.
Just become such a good reader of the pattern, because even though you didn't chronicle it, her body, if you ever forget it and her body goes back into that state, you'll just remap. And each time you remap, you get a better pattern, you become a better pattern observer, and that mapping becomes your user manual for how to go forward. So I always say to my students, like, don't get worried if the problem comes back. In fact, that's part of the whole joy of it. And that's how change happens. You know, I never did AA, but anyone who has would know, like, you work the program, right?
Yeah.
You work the program. And so if the pattern comes back, if the problem comes back, not to worry. We're not here to be afraid. It's like a non-dualistic approach to horsemanship. We're not afraid of the pain. We're not afraid of the resistance. We're not afraid of the no. If that comes back, we just get bet. We say, hi, no, like, truly. Now you're going to, hey, no, hey, pain, hey, resistance. You're just going to make me even better at knowing, because the no is where the work needs to be done.
Oh,
but if you're in a rush, it won't feel like that.
no.
And if you are a resistant person, not you specifically, if a person is resistant, then their no is going to be met with resistance. Now we've got two people resisting, dysregulating. But yeah, so chronicle or not chronicle, and I am a big fan of training journals, but even if it doesn't happen, their body holds the memory.
Yeah.
Your body holds the memory, and it'll come back. And if it doesn't come back, then great. Then you've got nothing but yeses. But if it does come back, you just get better at reading no's and finding out how to turn no's into yeses. And if you get stuck, then you probably need to thin slice. You need to go more molecular.
Yep.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
And I love that, because as you know, I've been dealing with a recurring back injury that's back. And I just love that reframe, because I know for myself, when I'm in a pain cycle, it's easy. And this probably relates to horses so much as well. It's easy to be like, oh my God, it's never going to get better. Like, I'm going to be like this forever. Like, it's that's where my fear goes, right? That's where the catastrophizing element of me goes into this like place of, this is never going to change.
And then the pain gets worse.
And then the pain gets worse. Yeah. Absolutely, because I'm tense and like having a bit of a freak out, right? And for any of you out there with chronic pain, it's not fun.
No. Yeah. And I say this not to oversimplify pain or undermine pain. And I say this as someone, and everyone's pain experience is different. I'm not saying just because I've had pain that I know everyone's pain, but I was pretty much out of commission for 2 years. And that's a lot of what brought me to this approach. And in that process, I was given the very deep insight that my pain is nothing but energy that is trapped.
Absolutely.
And when I experience my pain that way, when I'm able, first I have to have a nap. That's the first thing. It's like,
oh my gosh,
a nap. Because you're not going to be able to have this kind of gentleness with yourself when you've got like a to-do list that's a mile long, and you have to first have a nap. But then I sit with my pain and I watch my pain like it's a fireworks show.
Yep.
And it's sometimes like, whoo, that was a good one. Like, and I can feel it and the bigger the pain, the bigger the energy. And I'm like, wow, is the universe not gifting me with some powerful stuff? And like, quite honestly, this isn't just like a story I tell myself. I sit with the pain in this way. And I say like, okay, like, what if I could just allow that energy in? What if I could allow it to flow? And I'm not saying the pain gets better instantly. It's my ongoing, just like with the horses, the pain comes back, the no comes back, I work the no. But
I love that. That's the one of the things I've learned is that being with my pain, and I meditate with my pain. I go into it. I explore it. I'm curious about it. Like, that's when my injury first happened 11 years ago. I remember the sheer amount of resistance was just overwhelming. Like, I was like, no, like, this is not happening. That did not help, obviously. And it was through the going inward and just being like, what is this about for me? Like, what's the pieces? What's what's the unpacking that wants to happen. So yeah, thank you.
Do I remember hearing that you were a Vipassana girl? Did you do Vipassana?
I did it once.
Do you find,
did.
well, and even having done it once is like a massive thing
Did the 10-day.
And do you find like, is it still a tool you
I've dropped back into it, at times over, I found it very, excruciating, but helpful at the time.
Yeah.
I do.
You now have a center close to you.
I do, like literally like down the road.
Yeah. I'm hoping to go.
I hike past it.
Wow. Can you feel good vibes coming off of it?
Yeah.
Are they still operating?
Like try to look and peek in, but I do remember. I remember the pain. And the one day, I think it was like day 3. And I was trying to find my position, right? So everybody, just to contextualize this, like 6 hours of sitting or more a day, like just a crazy amount of sitting. And I am not I'm not a cross-legged individual generally. And so the pillows, like just pillows and cushions.
All about the pillows.
Oh my God. It was crazy. Like I would go in there and be like, okay, like 16 pillows and strategic positions.
Architecture.
Right. And basically what they say, everyone, is you're not supposed to move. Like by about day 3 or 4, it's like, you're supposed to just like, power through an hour sitting in the exact same position and not adjusting. And yeah, like there was one day I was for sure like looking down, like, is my leg still there? Am I still in one piece? Like eventually, interestingly enough, I found out that I could use like a little stool with my feet underneath that, kind of more like a riding position. And that was actually saved me. That saved me. But it was quite an introduction to my pain, because I was definitely like having a good ball on the meditation floor. And
and I mean, of course, there's like the potential to go over threshold, just like with the horse. I've done several, and it's really like, and I know it's not for everyone. For me, I credit it with a lot of even what I can do with horses right now. The level of space I can find in my body. I meditate every morning, and when possible, I try to do it at night. And it really is the ongoing teacher of finding that space in my own body, in my own energy body, and being able to bring that to the horses. But boy, are the actual courses initiation into, like, it's a rite of passage. The rite of passage.
It absolutely was. I think, I have some moments that I look back on and still giggle, because it was
you didn't leave else. Though.
Didn't leave.
That's
Did not leave.
Boy, isn't the day when it's all over and you get to talk to everyone just the best day
it was, but also so strange. I was like, okay, back out into the world. It was quite an interesting experience for sure. I think the meditation, I come and go with it a little bit. I'm not a super dedicated student of the meditation. I would like to be. I'm thankful that my work tends to be quite meditative, which is great, because I get a little dose of it anyways in my day. So that's been good. I wanted to, we were supposed to talk about all these other things, everybody. I'm sorry. We were going to talk about tracks.
Do we have 5 minutes?
We have 5 minutes. We got 5 minutes.
Do you have a specific question about tracks?
Well, specific question. I'm just so curious. So coming back to this whole new house thing, I am moving into a house that does not have my horses on the property. It's like a house in town in Duncan, and which is weird. I've had Diva at home for 11 years. And so I'm sort of looking at a few different possibilities where the girls are going and what that can look like, and what's going to be a best case scenario for them. Both of them tend to need a lot of enrichment activity, shall we say. Especially Raven can get bored very quickly, and Diva as well. Small spaces are really hard for her, always have been. So I'm just interested in any recommendations.
Sure. Just quickly, I mean, for anyone who's listening that doesn't know what track systems are, it's kind of coming out of, I think the author's name is Jamie Jackson. He was a wild horse observer and a barefoot trimmer. And he wrote this book called, I think it's a he, I don't even know. I'm assuming.
Yes.
Jamie Jackson wrote a book called Paddock Paradise. So I'm assuming you already have that book. Have a look at the book. I would also say I did a part 1 blog entry on my previous track system when I lived in the Kootenays, but I have a different one now that I live on Vancouver Island. So I wrote a bit about it there with a few tips on what components can exist in your track. But for me, when you say she gets bored with small spaces, the big thing about tracks, and by the way, I have convinced boarding facilities to kind of alter so if you're like kind of on the verge of convincing a boarding facility to maybe alter their property a little bit, please, you can have them call me and I'll give them some tips. But the general idea is that there's a perimeter track around the outside edge of a property, and it also saves grass, right? So they're not always on grass, especially, those draft horses, the potential for IR. So even a small space can feel a lot less small when there's flow. So that's a big part that I look for in a track system, is no dead ends. So I'm always looking for there to be, even if it's a small space, it's got some kind of continuous movement, and ideally multiple circuits. No dead ends. That's a big thing. So even if it's a tiny space, just no dead ends. Other elements, I would say multiple feeding stations. So that's even just nice in terms of, because as the seasons change, where sun is, if they only eat in one spot, where the sun is or isn't in the, what they hate in the summer because it's too hot is where I'm going to want them in the winter because sun is so scarce. So the more there can be multiple stations for feeding, and of course that would mean there has to be a roof so that the hay, but it doesn't have to be a shelter. Like I've just built a platform for the hay with 4 pillars and a roof for the hay, and then they could stick their heads in. So multiple stations. I try to incorporate trees. If anyone's interested, they can look at my Instagram. They'll see I've incorporated trees into my riding ring as well into the horse's habitat. And that helps with enrichment, whether it's scratching their bums or whether it's getting their head under a cedar limb, and that protects them from flies. So incorporate trees. And, there's so much I could say about track systems, but the final thing I'll just say for efficiency's sake is footing. And it's no small thing. And in wet climates, footing is its own level of strategy. So I would just say, like, if you want to ever talk about it more in the future, you can give me a ring. If anyone else wants to talk about track systems, not that I'm the expert, but I've done 2.5, and I've advised clients on them as well. And I've got a lot of thoughts on them.
Amazing.
My track is quite dynamic. So I love those are just some of the features.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure, Shannon. So tell us how we get in touch with you. How do people find you?
Sure. Yeah. So Humming Horse is my handle. I'm mostly on Instagram. That's kind of my main place that I inhabit. I really like the horse community there. So Humming Horse _ equestrian, I think, is my handle on Instagram. My website is humminghorse.com. It's overdue for a revamp, but you'll still get the gist. So those are the 2 main places.
Sweet. Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for being here today. Yes. It's been a very big pleasure of a conversation, and
we'll chat more, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning in today and for joining us this season. It's been a great season, and looking forward to season 5 coming up here sometime very soon. Okay. Bye for now.